Welcome to the Big Fat Real Estate Checks podcast with Marco Kozlowski, where we help investors like you get the knowledge and skills you need to replace your JOB with passive cash flow for life.
Hey, loyal listeners, this is Marco Kozlowski with Big Fat Real Estate Checks. I'm joined today with Gabriel Araish and Frank Galuccio, and both respectively in Toronto and Montreal. And I'm excited today to go over a follow-up of episode 57, when you get to a yes too quickly. If you haven't listened to episode 57, I suggest you do it very quickly. Hit the pause button and listen to that. And if you haven't listened to at least the first 10 episodes as well, please go do so, because the more you learn, the more you earn, and you'll really understand our processes, at least a big idea of the processes, at least, since we have lots and lots of content. The first 10 episodes will really explain to you how we buy assets using asset-based lending, so you never need to use your own money again. And in so doing, there are very specific skills that you have to learn and implement. And one of those skills is getting to an impasse, which is covered in also past episodes. I'd have to pull up the list because we have so many. But getting to an impasse is actually the most important thing, not getting to a yes. And if you do get to a yes too quickly, you're basically going to go splat against a wall. They're very specific processes in order to create deals, create great deals at significant discounts. We're talking over 30%, and how to really monetize every lead that comes in along the way. And anyway, they're a lot of detailed processes, and today we're going to discuss a gentleman that actually is enrolled in the program, that is struggling with that concept of an impasse. In fact, it's not a student uncommon issue. It happens a lot. Most people are designed and are programmed to want to get to a yes as quickly as possible. And if you get to a yes, it means you're going to get the deal. And in this business, it's actually the opposite. You want to get to an impasse, which is them saying, I want this, them understanding that you can buy it, but not at that price because it doesn't meet our matrix, and then creating a solution, which is presenting the contract. And there's a whole ritual and a process around that. And if you don't honor that ritual and process, you are going to be destroyed on a contract. And we actually just got a response from a contract that was sent over. I don't want to say his name, but his name sounds like Sam, and he used to live in Australia, but now lives in the UK. So that's all you're going to get. And he does the business from the UK in the US, and does an extremely good job. He's extremely astute. I have nothing but respect for the guy. He works extremely hard. I wish more of my followers and students were as hardworking as him. And he's just learning what needs to be learned, and making mistakes along the way. And we're of course helping him, and I'm honored to do so. He's a really great guy. So we're going to discuss his I guess the car accident, or the bloodbath, or the destruction of his contract. There was a yes that was achieved. It was sent over to an agent, and the agent just destroyed the agreement, because the agreement is really designed to protect us as the buyer. There are stipulations in there that make the seller accountable to give us the things that we need in order for us to use asset-based lenders. In most contracts, there's a timeline that says, hey, if you don't close within XYZ amount of days, you're done, you lose your money, you have a lot of risk, we can sue you, blah, blah, blah. In our agreements is putting the onus on the seller to give us what we need in order for us to close. And if they don't give us what we need, our contract extends until we do get what we need. So it puts the pressure on the seller versus on us. So it's a much better agreement that protects us as the buyer versus an agent and the seller. So I know, Frank, you brought this up, so we'll start with Frank Galuccio from Toronto, and let's discuss this. And it
is, and thanks for that teeing up this particular deal. So yeah, Sam, he is a hustler, and I see, when you see the train wreck in slow motion, this is what was happening, because actually it was around that time when we had episode 57. I was like, oh man, all right, but he is a hustler. He did negotiate the price down, but he got that yes too quickly. And he did a few things that he could have done a lot better to prevent this train wreck. And it is a train wreck. So we'll start from there. So basically it's a 4 unit, and we have specific paperwork for different asset classes and for different number of units. So it all started there. It was about 2 weeks ago, if not a little bit longer. He sent in the paperwork, our paperwork, which again puts the onus or accountability on the seller to perform certain tasks. And if they don't, then they're in breach. And many don't like that, especially some agents. They don't like that because traditionally the paperwork the agents use in their respective states, it's there to protect the seller. And the onus is all on the buyer, which should be the other way around because the buyer is coming to the table with money, not the seller. The seller has the property, granted, yes, and they got to be protected. And the paperwork that Marco has, that we have, it's set up where both parties have a responsibility, have accountability. And if you default as a buyer, then shame on you. Then you should lose your EMD and so forth and lose that reputation. So on this note, he started off, he sent in an agreement. He was overly aggressive on, we have an exhibit B with certain items that we would like to see during due diligence, just to make sure that the numbers check out, that the property checks out, and everything's, what the seller is saying it is. And it was a little bit aggressive for this type of asset, and for this size of asset. So that was the first clue that the agent did not like this. And she's like, hey, why are you sending me a commercial contract for something that is deemed pretty much residential? So 4 units it can go either way, residential or commercial. He said the commercial, but her focus was on the exhibit B. First off, that was her first thing. She goes, hey, he doesn't have all these things. This is a commercial transaction. This is residential. What are you doing? You're asking for everything under the book. So we corrected that. We course corrected. We said, you know what? Our fault, our bad. We're used to dealing with bigger properties. We'll amend it or just cross out what the seller can't provide and we'll take it to legal and go from there. So again, in a non-confrontational way, we just said, just cross out whatever's there, or we could just send you an amended one, whatever the case is. Yes, Marco.
Can you go over, for those that are listening and have no idea what an Exhibit B is? So I'm listening to this and I'm stumbling across this podcast, or I've been doing this a while. You don't have access to our paperwork because it's exclusively for those that are in the program. We give you hundreds of paperworks. It's not English, but you know what I'm talking about. We give you hundreds of forms and documents and contracts that have been time tested. So can you give an example, please, either Gabe or Frank? I know Gabe does contracts a lot too. Mm-hmm. What are some of the items that we had asked for? And again, we ask for very specific things. Mm-hmm. Since we are using other people's money, we're using asset-based lenders. We need to verify income, and there's a quasi. I don't want to go into the entire thing, but there's very specific things that we need to really verify income to prove or verify, because we have a saying, trust but verify. We have to verify the income is there. So I don't know who.
Yeah, I'll go. So one of the main things we ask for is bank statements. We ask bank statements for the last 2 years so that we can validate that the income is actually being deposited in a bank account, or basically it's going to prove that it's collected at least. We ask for things like financial statements and including the profit and loss statement and the balance sheet, which obviously in a residential transaction such as this one, there's no chance that the seller has a balance sheet. We'll ask for tax returns, a general ledger, which is basically a list of all the accounts that are hit through your bank account. So any expense that comes in will be recorded under its own category. So if you pay $500 for electricity, it's going to go into the utility account. If you pay $200 to a property manager, it's going to go to a property management account. If you pay $500 for taxes, it'll go to that tax account.
Now, not everyone has all that stuff. In a 4-unit, 5-unit, 6-unit, when you're playing with hundreds of units, this is very standard, right? Having all these things. But when you're dealing with a mom and pop or an agent that's used to dealing with residential, this is going to be almost like drinking water from a fire hose. They're going to get really confused. So there has to be a balance of understanding who, listening to who your audience is really, and not scaring the shit out of them with a list. Although there's nothing wrong with it. You can send a huge list and then what the hell is this? We don't have any of this shit. If you've done your impasse properly and you asked for too much, they said, listen, I don't have any of this. I really need to be paid. What can we do? That is a more productive conversation than being ripped a new asshole by an agent saying, trying to I'll let Frank or Gabe, go over what this email that we're looking at.
Before we get to the email, so the good part, the agent didn't rip apart the contract. He ripped them in in an email. So at least he didn't get a bug bath with track changes on the contract. But going back to the initial agreement, so from there on, and we pivot nicely. We said, hey, our fault, this and that. We're used to bigger properties. Then she started insisting on the state paperwork. And a lot of agents, are comfortable with that. Some brokerage firms require that the agent use the state approved agreement, purchase and sale agreement. And we didn't dismiss it right away. We tried to push back a little bit more, say, hey, if you're using our money, we need to use our paperwork. We've been doing this for several years. We use this paperwork for several transactions across many states, and it works. All right. It works for both parties. It makes both parties accountable. She didn't like that answer. She says, no, you got to use the state approved. And we said, you know what? That's fine. We'll have our legal take a look at it. So every time she pushed back, and you're getting all these pushbacks because she's not fearing that Sam, the student, she's gonna lose him because he didn't establish that impasse. So she's pushing back, and so we pivot back and say, you know what? We'll take a look at your. So we fought for our paperwork, and then we said, fine, we'll take a look at your state paperwork, but we may need to add an addendum to that, and we do have addendums for students where we put specific clauses in there that are in the original agreement on our paperwork that will super exceed what the state contract will say. So we're gaining back the control on our paperwork by using that addendum. So that's where we pivot, and that's where we left off on this one.
Oh, we're just staring at each other going,
oh, no, that's fine. Yeah. So no, you guys got the facts in front of you. So
it just sounded like you were still going on a roll, and then you just stopped. It's funny
because I can't.
We're not used to Frank stopping.
I've never heard silence from Frank's mouth in what, 5 years?
I usually just don't stop on the time. Yes. Wow. But anyways, I just wanted to bring it up, and that's where we came to this particular response from the agent.
Right. But it's kind of cool because we've talked about this in the past, and we've talked about it theoretically, and now we get this, lo and behold, a couple weeks later, we get a live case, and again, just to remind everyone, it's not Sam.
Yeah. So this is a symptom of not having an impasse. I just want to, there are two things that are happening. If you get your contract destroyed by, and again, this is the agreement here that was presented is for property that's significantly under 30% off. So there's a significant discount, and the conversations that we've had are, we want to move forward in a quick sale. Through the impasse, we say, listen, I know you want more than what we're willing to pay in cash, and this is the number the seller wants. We can get to that number, not cash and quick the way we've been discussing, since you want higher than what we're able to do on cash, but because you want more, we're going to do your number, but the terms are going to be a little bit different. So we're using an impasse as well to create terms, to create creative financing, to create a lot of different things. The impasse is a really magical place where you can really play around with how you help and serve your seller at that point. So by getting to a yes, the agent has, as you said, Frank, perfectly, the agent has no fear of losing Sam if it was Sam. So there's no fear whatsoever of losing this, this human at the other end. They don't believe that the person can close. They don't believe that they have necessarily the money, or they're so focused on the contract because they're an agent. They're not looking at the relationship that they don't want to lose with a cash buyer. They're looking at, how do I protect my seller and myself, versus looking necessarily at the big picture. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that is the agent's function. But I don't think there has been a state where our contracts have not been accepted by an agent and used. I don't think there's no law that says you have to use a real estate contract of that state for a transaction.
That's right. An
agent wants to use their contract, and a broker wants to use that contract because they know they're protected, and they know that all the clauses are there that are needed in order to go after you if you don't close. Make sure that the agent gets paid, make sure the broker gets paid, make sure, it's really designed to protect the broker, the agent, and lastly, the seller. I know Gabe is going through a situation now where, there was an agent involved, and the seller still decided to, do some shit, around the agent and go directly to Gabe, which makes no sense. So that's another podcast for another day. But it's just because you have the agent contracts doesn't mean that there's not going to be a problem. And if you use your own contracts, ones that know you're going to be protected, you have to fight tooth and nail to get those. And the only way they're going to accept that is if you got into an impasse. So easy come, easy go. If you got to a yes too quickly, you're going to lose the contract. And I know I'm missing some stuff. Gabe,
Yeah.
Frank, I don't know if you want to...
So just to add on that, or Gabe, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. If you
Well, just to
get an
add
idea
on that,
going.
where signs of miscommunication, where maybe the student could have improved on, was this agent appears, looking at this email, this agent appears to be confused that the student is portrayed as a cash buyer. Because now she's like, hey, it seems like you're looking for financing, right? And because of that, I thought we were dealing with a cash offer. So your price needs to come up significantly. So I don't think there was a great job done establishing, hey, we're a cash buyer. This is what we can pay. Because now she's having doubts. And because of that, her subsequent sentence is, hey, you know what? If you're looking for financing, your price needs to come up significantly higher. It needs to be, over the six figures or whatever. And we need a proof of funds. So right there, and she put it in bold and in caps. So right there, that's shouting in the email, I guess. We need proof of funds. And she wanted the student to send in a proof of funds, use the state contract, review it, sign it, date it with a local contract, which I remind you, she also put in capital letters and also in bold, basically saying, we're not using your paperwork, pal. Okay. So step aside. We're using our paperwork. And then the seller signs it. Submit EMD, which is earnest money deposit. So let's go so their contract, proof of funds. He's got to review it. He's got to sign it. The state contract. He sends in the EMD deposit, and then the seller will sign the contract, and then the seller's attorney will have the opportunity to either approve it or disapprove it within 5 business days.
And so right here, I just want to add, because we're ripping on this because of the way this was, or the impasse was not reached and they got to a yes too quickly. But let's flip the coin here. This realtor is doing a fabulous job for her seller. And if I wanted to use a realtor, she's definitely someone I would want on my team, just the way she's answering this. So she's not only doesn't believe him, she's giving him a lecture on how to do real estate or how to perform real estate. So evidently she doesn't even believe, not that he can't even close. She doesn't think he's ever bought a property the way this is disclosed. She's basically giving him the ABCs of how a real estate transaction works for her, because again, the realtor only knows what they know, and they've been used to doing something over and over and over in their careers. This is how they usually do things, so it must be true and it must be the only way to do things. So that's sort of why this is happening. But again, you have to highlight that this broker, she's doing a fabulous job here for her.
And she also then mentioned that our paperwork is riddled with contradictions. Now, that's contradictions in her belief, because I'm going to mention a few of them here. So this is her belief because this is what she's used to. So no fault to the agent. Like you said, Gabe, yes, you want someone like her when you're selling shit. Right? So no one's going to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. So the contradictions in her belief was, your agreement wasn't specified whether it was cash or financing, when it clearly says on paragraph 2, I think it's 2C, cash at closing. So it's clearly written there, maybe not in the format that she's used to. And that's why she's saying it's a contradiction. And then she also says that you typically have 7 to 10 days inspection, not 28. Listen, guys, I don't know about you, but you dictate how long your inspection is. If it's a larger property, you're probably going to need more days. If it's in a remote area, you're probably going to need, you got to line your team when they can get out there. So she, in her head, believes that, hey, a week to 10 days is sufficient. That's what it is typically, because that's her belief. And that's why she's looking at it as a contradiction, as opposed to being fact. Yes, Gabe.
Well, I was just going to say that typically is not law. There's no such thing as the word typically. That means nothing. That's just an opinion, and that's fair. And you can come back and say, well, typically we get 45 days, and so we've decided to actually cut it in half and go down closer to 28. So that typically means nothing. And this is important because not only is she lecturing, but she's also throwing things just throwing things on a wall, hoping that you're just gonna buy all the bullshit and deal with it. And it's important that in reading all this, that you sniff out things that are exactly that, BS. And I mean, I've never seen any 7 to 10 day due diligence period for it'll take a few days just to get the paperwork from anyone, just to be able to validate it. So very important that you read everything. There's a lot of things that are correct here on her part in the way she typically does things, but typically 7 to 10 days, this just doesn't make any sense.
No, and she also goes into not only the inspection period where it should be the 7 to 10 days, but she also goes into, she goes typically, the seller will not pay closing costs and recording fees. It's what you negotiate in the end. So what if Sam, the student came at a price and it says, we really can't do that, and say, fine, you know what, we can reach you over here, but you pay the closing costs. Is that not legal? Of course it is. Of course,
everything's legal.
Of course,
everything's
it is
on the table.
So again, this is the agent's beliefs, and that's what she's used to, and that's fine. But you got to address that. So she says they're not paying your closing costs or recording fees, and then she also goes on to say things like rent. She goes, rents are like taxes. She goes, they're prorated on the date of closing. Typically, maybe they are, but not. We're not typical people. So, and it's whatever you negotiate. We would prefer to have the rents for that month maybe accredited to the buyer.
We have clauses in there that say that hey, if we close at the end of the month, we want the month's rents. And not everyone likes it. Clearly she didn't, but sometimes it's able to get snuck in, allowing us to get an extra full month's rent without any expenses, which is it's a questionable clause. I'll agree with that, but we can ask for it. And it's clear, it's right there. And if they sign off on it, then it is what it is. And yeah, so anyway, let's
nobody's putting a gun to their head to accept it,
Yes. And again, we make offers to get rejected, not get accepted. So just to be clear, this is a great opportunity to learn. So this is not something that if anyone got this pushback and they didn't have us on their team to see really what to do next, most people would run away at this point, not even communicate back with the agent, and then just disappear. And then the agent will go, I knew it, they were full of shit. But that's really not what you're supposed to do. She's very emotional in this, and she has a very emotional reaction. She's very upset. So she's married to the deal and not the process, and we're married to the process and not the deal, right? Divorce from result, married to process. So she's very emotional, and there's a very specific series of things that have to be done, and we're going to reply I'm going to actually have Sam, if it was Sam, reply, and in a way that's going to either give her a choice: do you want our money or not? And then she has to make a decision for the seller. So we have to turn the tables.
And we're okay either way. Yeah. And I was just going to say that she has an emotional response, yet at the end she ends with, there are no hard feelings on my end, which is kind of, there's another contradiction that we can play on. But exactly. And because we're not married to the result, we'll give her a choice, and we're going to be okay either way.
In the end, listen, she wants to get this to the closing table. She wants to get a commission, and I get it for where she's coming from, and maybe she is emotional because there's been back and forth on this, and she believed that she had a closing coming up, and then she gets this. She thought she got sideswiped. All right.
This is basically an email that says my expectations are disappointed. I believe this, and this is what happened, and there's a gap in expectation, and that's when this happens. And again, it's Sam. If it was Sam, has not been doing this a long time. He's working really hard, and have nothing but amazing things to say about the guy. It's just a symptom of not understanding process and following process, and everyone has to go through this at one point. It's very rare that someone comes in and gets everything perfect the first time. So this is a very common pushback where an agent is, ripping a new asshole. And I have doctors that have sent Dr. David, 5 contracts in a row, completely murdered. also getting to a yes too quickly, and now it never happens again. He learned his lesson, but it took 5 times. And it takes the time it takes to learn the lesson. So I think, from a stepping back perspective, if you follow process and set expectations where I will not buy this property for cash at your number, I will buy your property at that number that you want with these terms. Do you want us to write it up? The answer is yes. It gets sent. Now, if they don't like the contract, that's a new conversation. This email is, not only do I not like your contract, but now because I think you're getting financing, which it doesn't say at all in the contract at all, she's making suppositions that, okay, now, you must not be a real buyer. But at the same token, if she didn't want the transaction to go through, she would not have invested all the time that it took to write this long, virtuous email, like a very, very heated email, right? So there's definitely some hope there to salvage this if possible. And sometimes you just have to leave the store and you have to say, you know what, my money's available, my money's on the table. I understand you're upset. I understand you don't want to use our contract. I understand that, you probably don't have any of this, but it's our money, our contract. And if you are insisting on using state contracts, we're going to have an addendum, as Frank said. And if you don't like the addendum, we're going to take our business elsewhere. No problem. I don't know if Gabe or Frank has something to add to that before we wrap this one up.
You're 100% correct. This suggests that she doesn't have any other buyers, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, and there's other things in here, but I think everyone gets the point that what happens when you come too quickly. And I think she does want a deal. And now it's, again, you can pivot back, and exactly what you said, Marco, is set the expectations now. It's not too late to set the expectations. And it's okay if you walk away or leave the store, as we call it. And see what happens. Maybe she'll chase after him and say, okay, well, let's see if we can come to a consensus on something. Maybe we can use the state contract, but use our addendum and scratch out some of our requirements or whatever, or come to terms on some of the things with the rents and so forth. So it's not dead. It's just yet another step, another hurdle now that the student has to go over, which technically could have been prevented perhaps in the beginning if it was communicated well.
Correct. If no impasse, easy come, easy go. No impasse, no solution. And it's a great lesson. And again, it's still in play, and it's not dead. It's just a hurdle. And if you know what you're doing, you can get through anything. And again, our intention is to buy something at the right price, and this is. Their intention is to sell it at the right price, which this is. So it's still a match. Now the question is how do we get the paperwork together and establish the trust necessary in order to formalize the agreement and move on to the next opportunity and close this thing and buy as many as possible. So, and there's a couple things now that are extra that have to be done in this case because of processes that were broken before. But thankfully, that's what we do for a living, is help folks that screw it up, unscrew it up. And some things you can unfuck. And this is one of them, hopefully. So, all right. Well, hopefully this was a good episode. And I really appreciate you listening as a listener. I think that was English. I appreciate you guys listening, and we're creeping up to the top. And I really am passionate about helping others achieve financial independence and wealth using other people's money and through process. You don't need money to make money. You need access to money and application of very specialized knowledge to make money. And that's what we're all about, is helping you with those skill sets and course correcting you as mentors when you go off course, because it's very easy to go off course, and it's very simple to get back on course with just very simple emails or very strategic conversations that can get things back on track. So we appreciate you very much as a listener. Gabe as well, and Frank, of course. Love you guys very much. Appreciate your time. And can't wait to see you on the next episode, where we don't know what we're going to talk about, but we know it's going to be good. We'll see you in the next one.
If you like this episode of Big Fat Real Estate Checks, then show some love by leaving a comment and a good rating. Also, as a thank you for tuning in today, we've got a special free gift. The journey to passive cash flow for a life starts by finding deals, and it's easier than you think. Simply go to getdealsbytuesday.com, enter your email address, and we'll send you a free quick start course called Deals by Tuesday. Even if it's 11 p.m. Monday night, this course will show you how to find discounted real estate deals by Tuesday. It's that fast and simple. Go to getdealsbytuesday.com and start your journey toward life-changing cash flow today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.